we've had you on the podcast a number of times, but back in March of 2023, we had you on to discuss various things, including a short but I think pointed piece that criticized what you called equity language. I want to just, since it's been a year and a half since then, and we've had an intervening election and people have been talking about these issues of language and what it is to be woke or not woke, etc. If you have sort of a thought on an epilogue of that story and where you think the trend of equity language is going, but first remind people what you meant by that.
Well, equity language is certainly not my phrase. It's a term used by individuals and institutions to describe a vocabulary that is informed by the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in extreme cases, there are handbooks in which certain terms are considered hostile to equity, and they're banned, or at least people are encouraged not to use them. And you'd be surprised at what kind of ordinary language.
Yeah. Can you remind people of some examples?
Stand, for example.
Stand up for your rights.
Yes. Vibrant, brown bag. Well, I could go on and on. So my essay argued not, we should be less woke. I didn't use that word. I don't like that word. What I argued was this kind of language makes it harder to see reality, to name it, and therefore to change it if it needs to be changed.
Right. You were actually criticizing that enforced language ideology from a progressive standpoint.
Or from a standpoint of honesty and of being able to see clearly. Because, I mean, Preet, if I am good at anything, it's writing. I have no other skills. I'm fit for no other profession.
You're a good podcast guest.
That's part of writing, I think.
I don't know about that, but okay.
I believe in clear language. I believe in clear thinking. I don't want to disguise my thoughts with a cloud of verbiage that makes it impossible for people to know what I'm really thinking and meaning. But people do that all the time, and not just in politics, but in journalism, in the NGO world. And I was saying we have reached a point now where if you can't say poor, you have to say disenfranchised and marginalized. It takes a bunch more syllables. Then you're making it harder to see it.
Yes, totally. The central insight, and I've thought about it a lot since, because that's not the standpoint from most criticism of that language usage. Your point to rephrase it is, if you sugarcoat the plight of the downtrodden, you are actually hurting the downtrodden. Fair?
Yes, absolutely. And I took a passage from a wonderful book called Behind the Beautiful Forevers. I don't know if you know that book.
I don't.
It's about a slum in Mumbai by Catherine Boo. She spent years getting to know the people there and writing their story. So I took a passage from it, a brutal but honest passage, and rewrote it in equity language just to show what it does, that it numbs your thinking. So where are we today? I think it's actually going to be harder for people to argue that it's harmful to call things what they are, because I do believe that this second Trump election has cleared up a fair amount of nonsense and preciosity on the left about what is good. It's been rejected. I think it's been pretty thoroughly rejected. Now, it's still embedded in institutions, and those institutions are not going to just change overnight. And in fact, we'll still see equity language guides coming out. But I think it's going to be harder to do it. I think the real language issue is going to be on the right. They will have power. They are going after cultural institutions. They have their own language. It's not equity language. It's a kind of MAGA language. And it's based on insult and vitriol and contempt and degradation. It's less polysyllabic and academic sounding, but it's cruder and more nakedly hostile. And you see it all the time on social media and on podcasts and coming out of the mouth of the president-elect. And I'll be interested to see whether that language, which has become almost standard in a lot of Republican circles now, finally tires out the public enough that people say, I'm tired of you lowering all of us to your level. I'm tired of you trashing values that we try to teach our children. I want some decency back in the country.
Do you know, and I agree with all that, and I applaud that statement, but I wonder if part of the reason that kind of rhetoric finds footing, it is not competing with poetry. It's not competing with eloquence. It's not competing with, the kinds of things that we would hope that are most idealistic and uniting and smart and thoughtful and good faith politicians, the way they speak. Instead, it's competing with utterly boring, vanilla, anodyne establishment nonsense. And the war of rhetoric and style and effectiveness as between those two categories, the boorish side wins. Is that fair?
Yes, especially in a democracy. And the reason is it sounds more like the people talking. It sounds like the way ordinary people talk. And in some cases, it is. Most people don't talk like an equity language guide or an academic paper or a cable news host or a political consultant. But most people also have a standard of decency that they kind of want to maintain because they have children, they have families, they have self-respect. And right now, the language of the Republican Party and the behavior, I mean, let's not forget how many nominees for the next Trump cabinet have been accused of sexual abuse and all kinds of other things, that is not necessarily the populism that the American people voted for. They may like it as entertainment during a campaign season, but a permanent change to our discourse, to our mental landscape, I still have enough hope and faith in this country that I don't think it's going to wear well.
It's also, it's lazy. It's just very lazy. And ultimately, I think people can see who's lazy and who's not, and you get tired of lazy, and you don't want to reelect lazy. And lazy speech and lazy rhetoric is a sign of a lazy mind. And ultimately, I think people reject that.
Amen. I'm with you, brother.
George Packer, thanks again for your insight, for your writing, and for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Preet.